Hi, welcome everyone. Our next speaker is Commander Geir Gunderson. Geir has been a military clearance diver since 1989 and now the head of the diving department with the Norwegian Military Diving Centre. Geir has undertaken a number of CRM instructor courses and brought CRM into the Norwegian Diving Centre in 2004. Geir's topic, bringing CRM into military diving, we'll discuss military divers work in teams where stress, decisions, teamwork, attitudes, positive culture are critical elements in success. Geir's presentation will focus on how to minimise the risk and use CRM at an operational level in military diving operations. Geir, welcome, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be invited to this first Human Diving Factor seminar. My name is Geir Gunderson. I'm 52 years old. I started diving back in 1985. I've been a clearance diver since '89. I've also been a sport diving instructor, a CMS 3-star instructor since 1995. Been a diving officer at the Coast Guard, patrolling the Barents Sea and diving up in Spitsbergen in cold water. I've also been a chief instructor at the Single Escape training tank, and also been an investigator at several Navy diving accidents and also some civilian. I was a certified CRM instructor from US Navy in 2018, and I've been head of diving department, educating ship's diver, dive supervisors, salvage divers, lots of other divers since 2006. I've been in the Navy for 26 years. So why do we need CRM in the Navy? This is just a snapshot of some accidents we had. We had lost 3 vessels the last 30 years. The last one was a frigate, Helge Ingstad, which collided and finally was lost only 4 years ago or 3 years ago. It was nothing wrong with the ship and nothing wrong with the weather. And I will say nothing wrong with the education either. But it's lined up with lots of small mistakes all the time that we have this big disaster. Earlier we also had this annually test for taking a submarine up like a whale. It went good for many years, and finally the chef was had a free fall for about 10 meters and broke his arm and had some cuts, but he could have died. And then we had to stop this kind of playground on board. So I will sum up some diving accidents around in the NATO. I will not go in detail in these accidents, but we had a very serious accidents in an American frigate in 1999, together with the Canadian ship Marguerite, where the ship's divers on the Canadian ship should do a simple hull search, what we call a half necklace search, on the American frigate. The divers did everything right, and also the supervisor had to go on board and have a kind of checklist signed out from the duty officer on board. He was busy doing his duties and just signed out without actually turn off all the machinery on board. And it ended up like this. This is a short animation of what happened. So one diver was stuck, and the other tried to help. He was also stuck, and a third diver also went in to help, and he was also stuck in the ship, in the main engine water intake. So all 3 divers were stuck. A 4th diver tried to help. He didn't manage to get them out, and 2 of them died. So we had a serious accident in the U.S. Navy Aberdeen Proving Ground. I think it was 2013, where also 2 divers were killed during a routine dive to 50 meters. Everything went wrong, and the U.S. Navy had to go through the culture and how they did the risk assessment before this kind of diving. This was a typical example where the divers just had to do this dive, even that lots of signs that they shouldn't. And it ended up that the CEO he was fired, and I don't think that is a way to make a good safety culture. But I think US Navy now is progressing in also CRM. This is a snapshot from a computer from a Belgium diver, which dived to, as you see here, 74 meters for 7 minutes with a Siva Plus or Viper Plus semi-closed rebreather. 2 divers diving together. One of them had a problem with his oxygen. It was delivered too much oxygen. On lots of the rebreathers we had a warning system. Oxygen cells, which was monitoring if it was too much or too little oxygen. That's what can kill you. So what the Belgium team had done was to take out this kind of safety mode, because they had many warnings which had to abort the dives. And it was nothing wrong at all. It was just wrong with the sensor. So they took this package out. It was a kind of barrier. And it ended up like when they finally needed it, they didn't have it. So the rebreather was just working manually. One diver fainted out and was sent directly to the surface with his buddy. Here's a picture when the diver is coming on board to the mothership. On this ship, we had all the resources you can dream on as a diver. We had 2 chambers, 2 medical officers, doctors, nurses, the best divers in the world. Also the national camera team from the television in Portugal at that time. I think it was about 40 to 60 persons on board, all divers, among the best in NATO. Even though it took almost 20 minutes before the divers were sent into the chamber. I think that was mainly due to the bystander effect. It was too many people there nobody actually took command. Here's a short video from this. And you see everybody is just walking around, and the doctors are targeting on just one person. The other person you can't see in this picture, but he is lying just beside. Is not giving oxygen and get a serious spinal bends and out of duty. He's still not diving today, and he had to stop his military career after this accident. And we had a fatality in the Dutch Navy in 2015, where a female clearance diver died at Curacao. They were diving this machine. It's a Swedish-made ice mix, which you can dive to 60 meters. You see it's a full face mask, which normally it's not very good fitted to female divers. It's normally too large, and the air is often bubbling out from the sides, and that is a normal problem. We have this same mask in the Norwegian Navy, and it's not made for everyone. So we think it started with a minor problem with getting this full face mask sealed. She had communication through a communication cable to the surface. And even though they didn't understand that she was in really serious problems before it was too late. So the last thing the diver tried to do was to take a free ascent. And unfortunately, the BCD had a leakage in one of the exhaust valves. And as the last desperate thing to do from 45 meters, she tried to take off her rig and just free dive up to the surface. Unfortunately, she didn't make it, and when the guys on the surface found out what really had happened, they just drag up a dead rebreather without any diver in it. The last accident from I'm going to talk about is from UK. It's quite new one from 2018, where doing some engineer divers were doing a deep diving course to 30 meters. I know that 30 meters it is not very deep, but these students had just been diving to about 8 to 10 meters on Horsey Island, and they were not used to use or empty the gas of the sets because they were diving at not very deep water, in fact very shallow. And when I finally get out to the open sea, here it was a 30-meter dive. So here two experienced divers should, two experienced students should do the first dive, which in fact also was a mission. They should, from the shot rope, they should make a line down to the helicopter wreck on the bottom and then go up again. For some reason, one of the divers didn't ascend. He also had a lifeline to the surface, but the top side didn't understand what was wrong before it was too late. And when he was taken up, he was dead. And when you look at the equipment, I think that the British system is maybe too complicated. They have too many warning systems and too many different systems to handle for a diver. And we also know the deviation from norm, which we've been talking a lot of on this conference. Also here, they had this diver through water communication speech module, which normally didn't work. So the new norm was that this system doesn't work. So what they did was to dive without even notice that it didn't work. This should be a kind of safety in this system. So unfortunately, he died, and a very good and long report was written. And I mean, very happy to see how this ends. I'm not seeing the final result of how the divers are diving in the UK right now. So we have incidents and accidents, and it's always underlying causes, mainly human error in all of these accidents. And what we see as most people think they do the right action when they do them. And the solution is there, but it's not being used. It's always someone that has seen that something good should have been done in another way, or that something wrong is going to happen, but they don't communicate it to anyone. So what about Norway? I know I've just been talking about accidents abroad. So we also had lots of accidents in Norway in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. About 10 military divers died during military diving. All reports were stamped secret and put into archives for decades. And blaming culture normally put responsibility on the supervisor or the diver or both. That was normal. So after another fatal accident in 1988, that is actually our last fatality. The inadequate safety culture was put on the agenda. So the first dive supervisor course was set up in '89, and the main focus was how to handle an accident, not how to avoid it, but how to handle it. So despite increased focus on safety, the mine clearance unit had a dramatic reminder of the risk of collisions on deep waters a diving accident in 2003, where two newly educated clearance divers nearly drowned, became a real eye-opener and resulted in a full examination of the technology and education, the culture, and the use of rebreather system. So I was a part of that investigation team, and I learned a lot of that. So as a direct result after this accident, we had the first CRM course in 2004, and it was instructed by the civilian airline company, SAS. We had to admit that human factors were the main reason for almost all of the accident and near misses we had experienced. However, the human brain has an amazing ability to forget. Only 3 years after the 2003 accident, most people, even in the Navy, had never heard about it. So these were two guys that got CPR and almost died, and after 3 years, it's forgotten. So in 2010, 7 years after the accident, the idea to reconstruct the accident was born, aiming to learn from it. So a script was written on the personnel participating in a real accident to call for, and a film was made focusing on how to do the decision making. The dive supervisor course was extended from 1 week to 2 weeks, with 1 week with a CRM training and 1 week with a practice. And this is how we train them. This is a kind of decision window. So from an event happened and the times go by, you have finally 0 options left. But you always lose some time before you, an example, go out of air. When you discover it, it's always when you're going to inhale. That means that the event has happened maybe some seconds earlier. And it's from this time you start developing your situational awareness. So how can we take the right decision? We have to find a point somewhere in the middle. If you wait too long, you have only one option left, and that may be the wrong option. And if you take the choice too early, it may be the wrong decision. So how can you train this? So hindsight bias is always easy to explain since all the data are available afterward. So it's very difficult to train decision making in diving. We don't have simulators, and we always have to outweigh the risk of training with the risk of a real accident. So the film I'm going to show now is going through the decision points after you've seen it, but it's a kind of film where we try to train people doing decisions. So the next movie now is about 7-8 minutes. It's the original movie is 30 minutes. So this is just some parts of it. So then you can roll video 1, please.
Klar på å se steinbit.
Ja, det blir det kanskje.
Det var artig.
Ja, artig det.
Kanskje vi får fange nå.
Ja. Så er det litt strøm også.
Når vi da kom ned på 10-15 meter kanskje, så vi da en steinbit som lå der. Og da ga jeg tegn til de andre om det var noen som hadde lyst til å prøve seg på den. Og da var det ganske kraftig nikking fra Martin Setnes. Og så bomma han litt med kniven, så steinbiten for av gårde da, litt opp gjennom strømmen. Så svømte han opp det han klarte, men så jeg til slutt at det kom til å ta så lang tid. At vi kom til å bruke hele dykket kun på å svømme etter den steinbiten. Så avbrøt vi bare det forsøket, og så ga jeg bare tegn til at vi skulle bare fortsette dykket. Så ga jeg OK-tegn til dem og fikk tilbake at det var greit, og så svømte jeg ned.
Vi kanskje 10 meter unna hverandre, og så ser jeg at han vinker meg bort den da. Så svømmer jeg bort den, og ser han i øynene, og så gir han meg tegnet at han vil opp da. Og når han plutselig vil opp sånn midt i et ellers fint dykk, så skjønner jeg at det er noe muffins. Så har jeg brukt den bypass-knappen som er på apparatet for å gi en litt ny frisk gass. Tenkte at kanskje han har litt lite oksygen etter å ha jobbet litt hardt. Tok jeg bare tak i den, og så begynte jeg å svømme opp med den. Mens jeg driver å svømme opp sånn, så gjør Martin en ganske brå armbevegelse, som gjør at pustemusstykket på mitt dykkeapparat detter ut av kjeften, blir slått ut. Og det skjer jo da så klart på utpust, så jeg har ikke saker. Jeg hadde ikke noe luftreserve i lungene i hele tatt, så jeg skvatt jo fryktelig. Det første du gjør er at du drar inn sjøvatten rett ned i lungene. Det blir jo kaldt en plass der det ellers er ganske godt ordent. Og når det der skjer, så klarer ikke jeg å konsentrere meg om Martin lenger. Da måtte jeg bare tenke på meg selv, og det var å komme opp. Så slipper jeg Martin, svømme og svømme og svømme. Jeg skjønte etter hvert at det går ikke. Så jeg ligger og flyter et bittelitt øyeblikk, så glimser jeg litt ned, og da mener jeg at jeg så Martin, han var bare 1 meter eller 200 meter. Så hadde jeg egentlig bare stått på stedet, hvile og sponne i vannmassen.
Så de etter hvert at de hang der, da, de gutta. Begge to hang liksom, med hodet litt opp sånn her, og munnstykket ut av munnen, og det boblet bare luft ut av munnstykket. Så tok jeg og tok tak i munnstykket på den ene, så stappet det inn i kjeften på han, og så tok jeg tak på og trykte på bypass-knappen. Og da så jeg bare at det kom masse spy og gørr ut av kjeften på han. Jeg tok tak i begge to, og så bare prøvde å begynne å svømme oppover med det. Men da kjente jeg at de var tung som bly. Så nappet ut blyene på den ene karen. Tenkte at nå for han til vers. Men da var det ikke noen reaksjon fremdeles. Og så trykte jeg i knappen av på brøstet for å fylle luft i drakten. Men da piplet det ut gjennom armen på han. Vi har sånne utventiler på armen, og de skur seg gjerne opp. Så skrudde jeg igjen den, og så trykte jeg på nytt igjen, og så begynte jeg å fylle opp drakten hans. Og da fikk jeg oppdrift på han etter hvert, og da var jeg så utrolig glad, for jeg hadde jo ikke kunnet bare gå opp selv. Det var bare, hvordan skal jeg få dem med opp? Og så kjentes det bare helt umulig ut når jeg først begynte å dra i dem. Så han ene måtte jeg bare sende, og det var bare ren lotto hvem det egentlig ble. Og andre mann prøvde da å få mer kontrollert opp, så da brukte jeg mer min egen oppdrift for å få han med meg opp.
Ja. Da du hjelper Gunderson opp. Ja. Hjelper han å få det. Ta han andre oppi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Det var 2 dykkere, 2 sannhetsfolk. Der er 1 mann på hver. Og Anders tok han første. Jeg skulle flytte båten. Jeg tar han andre.
Jeg ringer 113 nå.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Ja, hallo, det er Dag og Jensen fra Minedykkerkommandoen i Ramsund.
9, 10, 11, 12.
Vi har 2 mann som har druknet på nesten 40 meter.
1, 2, 3,
Så han ene har puls og pust og puster selv. Han får oksygen, og han andre driver med hjerte-lungeredning på.
Hvor lenge har disse ligget i vannet?
De var oppe etter ca. 8-9 minutter.
Ambulansen er på vei, men dere vil altså gå til Stangnes.
Ja, vi prøver på det.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 30.
Det er for mye bølger her, så vi kommer til å kjøre inn til kai nå rett på østsiden, altså på Hinnaug-siden av Kjelsundbrua.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Øyvind, han kom på en god beslutning der. Han hadde vært med på en ulykke en liten måned eller måned før. Med å sprette opp halsmansjetten, så er det mye lettere å få både luft og blodtilførsel, og du kommer lettere til å sende puls i halsen på personen. Vi hadde et O2-apparat med oss ut, så da fikk Øystein O2 til å begynne med, mens vi drev på med HLR på Martin.
Litt puls der, men det er jævlig svagt.
Når Øystein kviknet til, og vi fant puls og puls på Martin, så brukte vi O2 på han.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Jeg trodde vel han var død en periode.
Mange gode beslutninger som er tatt på grunnlag av faglig dyktighet og riktig trening. Og også personlige egenskaper, det er helt overbevist om.
Mitt navn er Martin Setnes. Årsaken til at vi prøver å formidle historien er jo for at folk innad kan dra nytte og lærdom ut av hele prosessen. Alt fra planlegging, gjennomføring, beslutningstaging og tanker og refleksjoner rundt det og den jobben vi gjør.
So, how can we train time and decision making? In this film, this covers almost 1 day of education, and the students are put into the same situation as in real. While the film is running, it is being stopped at critical decision points, and they have to figure out what to do. So typically, they have to make a decision 1 minute ahead. And this film is prepared with 6 critical breakpoints, and as the film is moving forwards, the student will gradually receive more and more information, expanding the situational awareness in a kind of real-time scenario. So the first breakpoint we have is at the diver's level. You find your buddies unconscious underwater. What will you do? In this accident, we dived CY55 semi-close rebreathers, so we didn't have any BCD. So both the rebreathers and the divers were completely drowned and quite heavy to get up. The second point is at the level dive supervisor level. He has to handle 3 divers surfacing, 2 of them unconscious. Which should you pick up first? 1 is alone and 1 is in the hands of the third divers. The third point is what to do with 2 unconscious divers, none of them breathing. During this sequence, we have actual running CPR training combined with ADE. We put 2 students together with 1 CPR doll without any notice in advance. This is a good way of learning, since most people have had some CPR training before somewhere, but normally with a stepwise method of learning. Our experience is that people do elementary mistakes when they are not prepared. So learning from own mistakes is probably the best way of learning for most of us. The fourth point is the emergency call with a 911. What are the most important topics in an emergency call? Number 5 is what to do in the CPR if the CPR is interrupted by heavy waves, like we saw in the film. Should we continue with CPR, or should we just go to land? What is most important? And number 6 is how to handle a patient to the medical service. What kind of information is important? What about the depth, bottom time, symptoms, progress, and so on. We have even used the film on diving medical personnel taking over at this point. They will see the actual chest X-ray of the divers and have to take the medical decision from now on. Should the divers have chamber treatment? What are the risks of AGE, DCI, infections, etc.? Should all 3 divers in the chamber? And so on. And the film summarizes how everything was done and the final result after medical treatment of both divers. And it's important to elaborate that there are no 100% correct answers here. It's probably many solutions to the same problem, but your mind is put in a kind of same situation as they were. And the film shows that at least this time everything was done right. So what do the students think about this way of learning? So what I think that this decision point, as you see here, can be dragged backwards. So when you're prepared, you take decisions earlier and faster. This optimal decision point is coming up earlier. And we also have a kind of feedback form, which we are given to the students in many years. They asked 2 questions. How relevant was the lesson for you, and how was the lecture presented, where you have to put in the score from 1 to 5, with 5 is the best. And we have done this now for 279 students for more than 10 years. And the score right here is 96 is average, which means that most students and these people are very different kind of students. It's combat divers, clearance divers, ships divers. It's people with long experience, short experience. Anyway, almost everybody mean that this kind of education is good. So I think this is a good way of learning. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the sunk cost fallacy. I heard some presentation yesterday about the sunk cost fallacy as well. And I've been on lots of missions myself where you push the limits. You want to do the mission, but to what cost? So for those who are not familiar with the sunk cost fallacy, it's also named the Concorde fallacy. Only 20 machines were built in 27 years. It was a high cost, and which never got into balance, and it's called a commercial disaster. It's very difficult to stop something when you have invested in it, even it's money or time or something else. So, and you can also learn from successful operations. So what I'm going to talk about next is a very special operation we had in 2014, where we went up to Plura. We had 2 Finnish cave divers were missing. They were drowned, supposed drowned at 114 meters or 112. And almost it's up in northern Norway. And this is a cave, and they had gone from the Plura source to the right, went through the air chamber and down to maximum depth up about 132 meters. And they were diving in 2 teams. So one diver died in the first team, and when the next team arrived 2 hours later, they found this they drowned friend, and 2 of them survived, and the third also drowned, was panicking, and then we had 2 lost divers at this point. So the Navy doesn't have divers to do rescue operations like this. So the police organized a plan with to get the 2 bodies out, and the lead divers were Rick Stanton and John Walton, and also Jason Mellinson, supervised by the Swedish-based cave diver Mark Dougherty, which also is from UK. Very good divers, very nice people. They also been there on a mission back in 2006 and picked up a body that was on an earlier phase of the Plura, and it was not that deep. So after weeks of planning and organizing, the cave was finally prepared for the dive teams. Tons of equipment was brought into the dry part of the cave, about 400 meters. And we had recompression chamber at site, medical personnel, logistics, police, fire brigade, Navy officers, and volunteers. And the dive team found the first body at their first attempt. However, they reported it would be difficult to get the bodies out. And the gut feeling was that many divers were needed, and the total risk would be quite high. So summing up all the potential risks, including cold water, 2 degrees Celsius, 100 meter plus, number of dives, restriction. We decided to abort the operation. Here is me together with Mark and Rick, and here is the dry part of the cave where the dive site was, actually 400 meter with a 100 meter height meter in this cave, so you have to actually climb down to the dive site. And here is the missing diver, seen from the opposite direction, taken from the Finnish divers that were successfully recovering them after that we aborted. So then you can run video 2, please.
Skal være nærmest der de omkomne ligger, på 110 meters dyp.
Hvis det for risikabelt, så avbryter vi. Så hvis dykkerne kommer opp til engelsk og sier at det blir meget, meget vanskelig, det her vet vi ikke om vi lykkes, så må vi gjøre en vurdering ut fra det de sier, og så får vi eventuelt vurdere om vi stopper operasjonen. Men det for tidlig å si nå. Nå det målet vårt å få de her ut.
We came to a point where I think we have to weigh up that every single dive that we do to those depths in a cave is a risk, and the more dives we do, the more risk there is, and unfortunately, I didn't see that we could have any way of safely resolving the risks or to perform the operation safely. All the divers, I think, worked very, very hard to dive to 112 meters in these kind of conditions and do that kind of work is a very, very, very hard and very difficult job. And I'm full of admiration that they gave it the best try that they could, and I don't feel able to ask any more of them.
So we had already invested lots of money and time to get the job done, and it's easy to do what we call the sunk cost fallacy, just to take another dive. But both Rick and John have described the abort operation in the books. The books are really good. You should read them if you don't have. Indicating some kind of frustration of the interruption. However, this was an official operation led by the police, and there were no room for mistakes or bad luck. So how much should we invest to pick up 2 dead bodies? So in hindsight, I still think the abortion was the right thing to do, regardless of the Finnish operation some weeks later, bringing out the 2 bodies successfully. So this was a kind of good teamwork where about 30 people doing the mission were agreed upon to abort the operation, and when we sum up, we were happy with that. And everybody interested in diving had maybe seen the finished film from this diving into the unknown, but the Finns could do it without breaking any rules. They had their own plans, and they also learned from the British team. So the last thing I'm going to talk about a couple of minutes is how can we bring a CRM out in the field? In the Norwegian Navy, We have different levels of CRM education. We have basic CRM courses, we have instructor courses, and we have specialized courses like diving. Among the most usual mistakes we do is to forget. All divers have forgot something essential during their career, even a mask or the fins or something. It's small margins to fuck up a dive, and normally it doesn't have any consequences at all. An easy way to find out if your safety culture is trustable is to test it. You have to have a culture for it's allowed to say something to your colleague without be put into jail or something. So we have to be allowed to do mistakes and allowed to tell people doing mistakes. So this is just a small example. One of the things I normally forget most myself is to put on the suit inflator, like you see on the picture. So sometimes when I'm going out diving, I ask my supervisor or buddy, can you check me out? Does everything look right? And take out this on my own will before the dive and check if they actually find the missing link here. If they don't find it, it's a way I tell them to test it. Could you please check me once again? I feel it's many weeks since I had my last dive. So what's important, if you sometimes forget it and I snag it, it's very easy to see I didn't forget it. I always connect it as the last thing before I jump into the water. This kind of communication form will make a negative safety culture. So my experience is that the CRM training has no value if it's not used in everyday operations. So the accidents happen when they are least expected. Some key points I have is listed above. So if you follow the SOPs, the standard operation procedures, you have a really good statistically way to get out of the dive without any problems. If you use CRM and also use it like I just showed you, you can put up some traps, check if they are being controlled by the supervisor or buddies. You have to have no blaming culture. Debriefing is good, both on good operations and bad operations. Learn by experience and be mentally prepared. So that is my advice. So this is the last picture from me. This picture with the frigate in the background, where we also had some diving. So that was all, I think.
You're muted, Ange.
Thanks very much, Geir. Thanks, Brian. That's quite an interesting presentation that you've brought into us today, and I thank you very much for it. I have a question for you around CRM. There's a level of maturity for CRM in aviation. When CRM was introduced into naval diving, were there any challenges, and how were they overcome?
That's a good question, and the problem with overdiving is the culture. We select people which is quite brave and risk-sensing people. The divers we recruit is typical running bicycle and parachuting and lots of other things. So we have to have leadership to follow them up. If you don't have that, you get a bad culture where they're pushing the limits all the time.
Mm. Yeah.
So when we started the first course, we had to have an even tougher guide to learn us how to to not doing mistakes. And everybody listened to a firefight or a fighter pilot. So we had a fighter pilot educating us at the start. And that was, right now, I think we're doing most of it ourselves, and we have done this for almost 20 years now. So, but we have to start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. With CRM, there's a colloquial saying of see it, say it, fix it. Was that when you introduced CRM into the naval diving teams, the ability to speak up when a situation may call for your traditional hierarchical command structures, using the see it, say it, fix it? Was there an element of training or foundation training around for a lower ranked staff personnel to be able, was the training around challenging that senior decision making in a manner that would call out, for example, a red flag or a situation that wasn't working within the diving?
Yes, that's also a good question. It's that's why we have to introduce CRM, because some people try to raise their hands and stop the activity, but normally they was dropped on the next mission or something like that. So we had to turn the culture upside down, take out some rotten apples that didn't want to be a part of the CRM community. And today, I will say that the people we have problem with in the CRM is the old guys like me, 50 plus. They're still 20 in their heads. So the young guys are quite good and do what they are told. But sometimes the old guys should go forward and show how good they are. So that's maybe the biggest problem we have right now.
Okay, that's great. We haven't any further questions that have come up. So, Geir, I would like to thank you for your presentation. It's been a great presentation, particularly in the information around CRM and how to introduce it into a team environment. I really appreciate the topic. If anyone would like to have any further questions or continue a conversation with Geir, there are two tables called Meet the Last Speaker. You'll be able to find Geir on the table 2 or hall 2, Meet the Last Speaker, where you can carry on the conversation. Our next presentation is with Dr. Helen Perelin, and Helen will be speaking about human factors for novice divers, why and how, and that will be coming up at the top of the hour. So we'll see you all then. And Geir, sorry, thank you very much again for your presentation.
Thank you very much.